All right, everyone. So we have another video from MathWiz. This one is called "In Defense of Talk No Jutsu." Now, when it comes to Talk No Jutsu, we all know that this is something that's been memed basically to hell and back in basically all of anime ever since the Naruto series was introduced. And when I think it was literally when Naruto gave that speech to Zabuza that everyone likes to go back to and say, oh, the first instance of Talk No Jutsu. Ever since then, it's been memed to hell and back. And it's not just in Naruto. You see it even in other anime series whenever you have a character like give this long impassioned speech to whether it's like a friend or an enemy or whatever. They say, oh, he's going full Talk No Jutsu, or oh, he Talk No Jutsu'd him out of this, or whatever. It's just a part of anime culture now, just like the Super Saiyan transformation from Dragon Ball. Ever since it was first introduced, now anytime a character has a transformation or is using a power that gives them like an aura or whatever, or they say, oh, he's going full Super Saiyan. And yeah, it's just something that's a part of anime culture. And I'm curious to see this video because I was requested to watch this, saying "In Defense of Talk No Jutsu." I know there's a lot of people out there who like they don't like Talk No Jutsu. Me personally, I don't mind it. It's whatever. But let's go ahead and watch this video. And I'm gonna try not to pause too much because it is a 46-minute video, and I don't want this video to be longer than it needs to be.
There's one aspect of Naruto that was explored brilliantly over the course of the entire series. One motif that remained consistent throughout. For some, it's the worst part of Naruto. For others, it's a big meme. For me, it's a stroke of pure genius.
Alright, so okay, just gotta address this real quick. It's the whole thing that I do in videos where I gotta pause. I know a lot of you don't like it. I get it. It's annoying me too. It does. I don't want to do this, but the thing you gotta understand is I kind of have to. I really do, because dude, the copyright system in YouTube is broken. I know I'm not saying anything new. Everyone knows this. And even if I do something where let's say I just take the video off screen whenever there's a clip. The problem is that if a video is like this where it seems like it's just like there's multiple clips, I'll have to basically take the video off the entire time, so that doesn't work. And even if I just have the audio being played, it's still not going to work because audio is even worse when it comes to copyright. Like it's almost impossible to defend yourself against audio. It's nigh impossible. You can't do it. You can't. Don't even try. So that solution's out. So literally the only chance I have is to either keep the volume as low as I possibly can to the point where you can still hear the video, but also I have to do this thing where I I've got a filter over it, but I also gotta pause every now and then because again I am trying to do whatever I can to avoid getting hit by YouTube's copyright bot. Like you have to at this point if you want to do this. I know it's annoying. Believe me, again, it's annoying me too. But I kind of have to. It's unfortunate. Like the only solution is to have YouTube basically fix their copyright system to where it actually recognizes fair use. But until that happens, we're just gonna have to deal with it. It sucks, I know, but the only thing I can do is just wait for them to fix things.
I am, of course, referring to Talk No Jutsu.
And I know someone might say, well, wait, but they have the clip in their video, so why does your video get hit? Again, you're gonna have to talk to YouTube because I sure as hell don't know why my video gets hit and theirs doesn't. You're gonna have to take it up with them.
Naruto's supernatural ability to defeat any opponent and completely change their ideology just by talking to them. Now, contrary to what some people may believe, Naruto didn't always have this ability, but even when he did use it, his words weren't just words. Each successful instance of Talk No Jutsu was supported
both
by Naruto's actions and the past experiences of his opponent. On top of that, each one of his foes had an apparent contradiction in their ideals that Naruto forced them to recognize, and it was the contradictions that led them to change their perspective. Not lazy, overly optimistic writing, not the power of friendship, but the antagonist's own hypocrisy. And on the topic of hypocrisy, let's go back to the origin of Talk No Jutsu. Let's go back to the land of waves.
Okay, yeah, see, it's that shit. It's where they include music from the actual show. That's again, you cannot defend yourself against music. It's almost impossible unless you get like written permission from the owner, where they tell you like, okay, yeah, you can use it. Unless you have that, don't even try to defend it, or don't even try to defend yourself, because it's impossible.
Prior to his initial conversation with
Haku, I think we should be okay now.
Naruto's desires were overly simplistic.
Yep.
He had a goal, but not a purpose. In other words, he knew what he wanted to do, but he didn't know why he wanted to do it. Did Naruto want to get stronger for himself or for someone else? He had never thought about it until he met Haku, and so it was through Haku that Naruto developed his worldview. Haku's strength came from his desire to protect what was most precious to him, and that resonated with Naruto. He recalled his past experiences with Inari, Kakashi, Iruka, and realized that he wanted to protect people just as they protected him. Haku's impact on Naruto ran deeper than that, though. When Haku believed that he no longer had a purpose and asked to be killed, Naruto was clearly upset about it, but he nevertheless prepared to oblige him under the depressing pretense of, that's just how the world works.
Yeah.
There's no other way. Sasuke's supposedly dead body served to confirm in Naruto's mind that not everyone could achieve their dreams in this cruel world. And though he and Haku could have been friends under different circumstances, that was now an impossibility. He saw two kids around his age who had both failed to attain their dreams and seemed ready to assume that there was nothing he could do. But then something happened that changed his mind forever. Haku stopped him, took Kakashi's lightning blade to save his master, and then Zabuza, the cold and sadistic assassin of the mist, shed tears for his subordinate.
Still one of the best moments in the entire series. There's a reason why people keep going back to this moment and rewatching it, because it's that good.
Though Zabuza viewed shinobi as tools, he couldn't treat Haku like one.
No.
When Haku sacrificed himself, Zabuza had a chance to kill Kakashi by slashing through his disciple, but he hesitated. Despite everything that Zabuza had said about Haku, he couldn't dispose of him like a broken tool.
Yeah,
his hypocrisy was reinforced when this
And what I loved about that moment is that this was something like even Kakashi noticed. Like he noticed, he hesitated, and he knows that all this talk that he's been spewing about, oh, like shinobis are tools, are not supposed to have emotions or whatever. He knew that he was full of shit, basically. He knew that, and that's why he wasn't performing to the best of his ability. Like even Kakashi noticed, like, dude, like you're slowing down, you're taking these really wide, obvious swings at me where I can basically dodge it with my eyes closed. Like, what the hell are you doing?
This scene was called back to in the war arc. As a mindless puppet whose feelings and free will had been stripped away, Zabuza truly became a tool to Kabuto, and Haku truly became a tool to Zabuza. This mind-controlled Zabuza showed no hesitation in hacking through Haku, but in that state, he wasn't really a shinobi. He was a tool, but he was no longer human. While still alive, however, Zabuza couldn't escape the emotional baggage that came shackled to his humanity. Haku lived to protect Zabuza as his tool, yet he couldn't bring himself to kill Naruto or Sasuke, even when doing so would have helped.
Because that wasn't him. It's like even Zabuza pointed out, it's like that's just not who Haku is. He just can't bring himself to be like this emotionless, tool that does whatever is needed by the owner. It's not possible. Like even when he says, it's like, I'll do whatever it takes to protect him, even if it means I have to kill someone. Like even Zabuza knew that. No, it's like, dude, I know you're not going to do it because that's just not who you are.
To protect his master. Likewise,
see, even here he had a chance to kill, or excuse me, not here. Let me see.
While still alive, however, Zabuza couldn't escape the emotional baggage that came shackled to his humanity. Haku lived to protect Zabuza as his tool, yet he couldn't bring himself
he had a chance to kill Naruto
or Sasuke, even when doing so would have helped to protect
his
master.
And he had a chance to kill Sasuke, he couldn't do it. Because it's just not who he is.
Likewise, Zabuza was supposed to be nothing more than Gato's tool, but in his last act, he defied Gato and thanked Haku for standing by his side. By affirming their humanity, Haku and Zabuza proved that shinobi couldn't just be tools.
No.
Once the battle was over, however, Sakura wondered whether or not those two were right about what a shinobi should be, to which Kakashi replied,
"Shinobi ってのは自分の存在理由を求めちゃいけない。ただ道具として存在することが大切。それは木の葉でも同じだよ."
He said that, but when asked if he actually agreed with that idea, Kakashi said no. That this was merely an ideal that all ninjas strive for, rather than what ninja actually were. In other words, not everyone agreed that a ninja should be an emotionless tool, but because that was the widely accepted notion of the perfect ninja, most people just went along with it. That's why, when Naruto rejected that ideal, and said that he would find his own ninja way, it didn't come off as mere fantasy. The current shinobi system was based on a falsehood, and while it would take a tremendous amount of effort to reform this society, actually inciting that change wasn't an impossibility. But before Naruto could convince anyone to change the fate of the world, he first had to convince one ninja that he could change his own fate.
Dude, I don't know how everyone else feels, but I still believe that Neji got screwed. Like, he was one of the best characters in Part 1 Naruto. And then in Shippuden, he basically just got shafted to the sidelines, and then he just gets killed. See, that's why I always thought that, you know what, dude, if you're gonna do this to him, you might as well have just killed him at the end of Part 1 in his fight with Kimimaru. Or not, oh no, not Kimimaru, it was Kidomaru, sorry, I always confuse the names of those two. But you might as well just have, you might as well just have killed him. Same thing with Choji. It's like, and I know that may sound harsh, but it's like, if you weren't gonna do anything with them in Part 2, then just kill him. I mean, you had a great way to write out their characters. It's not like they would have just, you know, died off screen, or they would have died doing nothing. No, they died accomplishing something. They took out two Jonin level fighters. Like Choji was a boss in his fight against Jirobo. Neji was a boss in his fight against Kidomaru. Like, if they died doing that, no one would have had a problem with it, and it would have been like a good way to write off their characters. But instead, he saved them. I don't know if it's because he was told by his editors, like, dude, you this arc is kind of depressing. Maybe you want to have like a more hopeful ending. But no, I feel like he should have just killed them off. And have the arc would have been really depressing, because like members of their team died and they still failed at the end. But I feel like that would have been much better, because it would have taught Naruto that in this world, it's like, dude, you're gonna fail, and if you fail in this world, it's gonna result in people dying. And that's like, that could have been a great lesson for Naruto to learn at that point, because it would have caused him to take his missions a lot more seriously, and it would have motivated him to get stronger, to try to make sure that, you know, something like that never happens again. And then maybe in Shippuden he could learn that, and I think he did kind of learn it in the war arc when Neji died, interestingly enough. Like he would have learned that, you know, it doesn't matter how powerful you are, you can't save everyone. Like, people are still gonna die, you can't protect them all, it's just not possible. And I feel like that would have been like a good lesson for Naruto to learn. And again, like I said, he did kind of learn that in kind of, maybe not really, in the war arc. Okay, yeah, he's gonna have to.
Neji Hyuga subscribed to the notion that all individuals have a predetermined destiny, and that there is nothing anyone can do to change that. At first, he made his philosophy seem pretty convincing. Before his fight with Hinata had even begun, he read her body language like an open book and obliterated what little self-confidence she had. Without throwing a single punch, he would have given her a full-blown panic attack if Naruto hadn't interfered. But all of this strength and menace cleverly masked the obvious contradiction in Neji's ideals. While his all-seeing Byakugan allowed him to see the flaws of the world around him, those distractions blinded him to his own dishonesty. He told Hinata and later Naruto that people can't defy their destinies, and yet his most significant moments showed him actively attempting to defy his own. Neji's cadet...
Okay, so I said I wasn't going to pause too much, but I just wanted to ask you guys, like, what do you guys think of, like, the gentle fist fighting style? I've always thought it was kind of cool. Like, you know, a different kind of fighting than the typical, like, you know, punching, kicking, destroying buildings and all that. I know it's not as flashy, but I always kind of liked it because it involves more precision. You know what I mean? So I'm curious just to get you guys' thoughts on it. And it kind of sucks that we don't really see it much lately.
Moments showed
Even
him
in the Naruto
actively
series, we didn't really see it that much.
To defy his own. Neji's cadet branch of the Hyuga clan had been forced to serve the main branch for generations. This was a fate that Neji had been born into, so according to his logic, he would forever remain inferior to Hinata's main branch. Yet, when he was paired against Hinata, he viciously attacked her on a mental and physical level. He consistently referred to himself as an elite, in spite of the inferior bloodline he was born into. While most Talk No Jutsu recipients tried
I don't know why it...
to suppress or abandon their conflicting desires or tendencies, Neji boldly displayed his hypocrisy without even realizing it. That's why when he and Naruto faced off, their battle was a simple one. Both boys stubbornly clung to their ideals and butted heads over and over again, each believing the other to be full of crap. The difference was that Neji's actions and words were contradictory, while Naruto's remained consistent. As such, it's only fitting that Naruto, the problem child who couldn't even pull off a basic clone jutsu in the Ninja Academy, would fool the talented Neji with his trademark Shadow Clone Jutsu, a Jonin-level technique he had mastered as an attempt to defy his fate. He won the match, and by winning in this manner, by using an ability that a so-called failure should never have perfected, he definitively proved that Neji's philosophy was wrong. This was
And what's interesting is he didn't just use like a regular clone jutsu, no, he used a more advanced version, like an actual shadow clone, which even Jonin struggled to be able to learn that technique.
Hammered home when Neji found out that the inciting incident for his pessimistic worldview was actually a lie. That his father hadn't been forcibly killed, but instead chose to die of his own free will and thus escape the shackles of his predetermined destiny. There was no room for debate. He was wrong.
ためにだけ戦い、自分を愛して生きる。他人は全てそれを感じさせてくれるために存在していると思えば、これほど素晴らしい世界はない。この世で俺に生きている喜びを実感させてくれる。殺すべき他者が存在し続ける限り、俺の存在は消えない。
Gaara was the first of many twisted Naruto parallels that appeared in the series, but he also served as a combination of previous conflicts Naruto had overcome. Like Neji, Gaara had been shackled to a predetermined destiny of his own. He would forever be hated. And like Haku, he had been left without a purpose for living. Gaara was born with a monster trapped inside of him, and he had been cast aside by his village just like Naruto. As a child, he craved friendship and acceptance, but was denied these things at every turn. Constantly met with the same contemptuous glare. Eventually, after he was betrayed by the only person whom he thought loved him, Gaara did what Neji refused to do and embraced his fate. He decided that families were mere hulls of flesh connected by hatred and murderous intent, and that he could only survive off the suffering of others. Killing became his purpose. Isolation became his vindication. Or did it?
本当の孤独を知る目。そして、それがこの世の最大の苦しみであることを知っている目。言ったはずだ。お前は俺と同じ目をしていると。力を求め、憎しみと殺意に満ち満ちている目。己を孤独という地獄に追い込んだ者を殺したくてうずうずしている目だ。
One cannot truly feel hatred without first experiencing love, and therein lies Gaara's conflict. He claimed that he killed to feel alive, and in doing so, he held isolation above all. But in truth, Gaara hated being alone. The very source of his hatred, represented by the kanji that he carved into his skin as a child, was his wish to be loved. He tried to abandon this desire by loving himself, but he could never fully do so. To Gaara, a meaningful battle wasn't just a physical deathmatch, it was a scenario in which one individual waged their purpose against another's. And by losing the battle, that person would lose their reason to exist. In both Sasuke and Naruto, Gaara was confronted by an opponent who shared personal ties with others. Since Sasuke's conviction was split between his desire to protect his comrades and his desire for vengeance, he was defeated. Against Naruto, however, it was Gaara's resolve that faltered. After Naruto had learned of Gaara's upbringing, he viewed Gaara as a manifestation of the monster he himself could have become, as well as a reminder of his own dark past that he wanted to leave behind. Because of this, Gaara impacted him in a way that no one else in the Chunin exams could. Where Neji had angered Naruto, Gaara terrified him. Where Naruto had been itching to fight Sasuke, Rock Lee, and others, he wanted to avoid Gaara altogether. That is, until the lives of his allies were at stake. Unlike Gaara, who believed that isolation gave him strength, Naruto's power came from his connections. And unlike Sasuke,
well, that and the fact that he has a tailed beast inside of him, so...
Naruto's commitment to his comrades was absolute. He initially feared Gaara not just for his similar background, but also because he, unlike Naruto, had managed to fight for himself while remaining isolated. He was afraid of the possibility that embracing solitude would make one stronger than those who had escaped it. When forced to fight him, however, Naruto recalled Haku, another shinobi who once stood at the center of solitude, and was reminded that loneliness does not lead to power. Only by protecting others could one truly become strong. And because Naruto's ideals were unwavering, he won. Gaara, on the other hand, couldn't let go of his lingering longing for love, and as such, he lost. As I mentioned previously, Sasuke was weak because he lacked conviction. He stood at a crossroads with two paths laid out before him. There was his brother's path, the path of finding strength in his hatred, and then there was Naruto's path, the path of finding strength in bonds. Would he embrace his anger and take everything upon himself, or would he reject his anger and find solace in friendship? He was torn between two ideals, unable to fully commit to either, and eventually, he would get his wake-up call in the form of Itachi, who had returned to the village not to confront Sasuke, but instead to retrieve Naruto. When Sasuke challenged his brother, he was brushed aside and met with a response.
Just told, go away, yeah. Okay.
Sasuke had spent years preparing for this chance meeting with Itachi, but his wishy-washy efforts had gotten him nowhere. Naruto, who had stayed true to his conviction, was getting stronger, while Sasuke, split between love and hate, was falling behind. After being ignored and humiliated by the man he sought to kill, Sasuke's indecision had reached a breaking point. Would he abandon his quest for vengeance, or would he abandon his comrades? Unlike Gaara, Sasuke had tried both, and based on his own experiences, he decided that he couldn't walk the same path as Naruto without remaining in his rival's shadow. And so, Sasuke chose revenge and left the village. When Naruto finally confronted Sasuke in the Valley of the End, he lacked the same level of understanding that led him to victory against Neji and Gaara. Rather than challenge Sasuke on his ideals, he instead attempted to guilt-trip him. Our peers risked their lives to bring you back. Orochimaru killed the third Hokage. Does Konoha mean nothing to you? To Sasuke,
yeah, that wasn't gonna work at the time.
These were non sequiturs. He didn't care about what other people had done, he cared only about power and how to attain it. So what if Orochimaru killed the third Hokage? He could make Sasuke stronger. To win Sasuke over, Naruto needed to convince him that the path offered by Orochimaru, the path of hatred, was not the path to power. And to do that, he needed to fight and defeat Sasuke. So they fought. But because Naruto couldn't understand Sasuke and tried to drag him back to Konoha by force, he lost. His talk no jutsu failed. Meanwhile, Sasuke had understood and even acknowledged Naruto's efforts, which allowed him to win on this day. In the future, Naruto would learn from his mistakes, and these two would clash again. But before that, the pain of his failure would grow even larger.
Lady Chiyo, in my opinion, very underrated character. Very underrated.
し最後になって正しいことがやっとできそうじゃ。
The next two story arcs highlighted Naruto's struggle to move past his loss. Hot off the heels of a 3-year time skip, Naruto had a new look, a better grasp of his abilities, and an enhanced feeling of inadequacy, knowing that the power of the nine-tailed fox was slowly eating away at his psyche and on the verge of triggering a severe mental breakdown at a moment's notice. Worse still, another one of his comrades was abducted, and just like last time, there was nothing he could do to prevent it. In typical Naruto fashion, he plunged headfirst into the Kazekage rescue mission, but because he couldn't keep his emotions in check, he accomplished next to nothing. The only character who actually benefited from his inclusion was Lady Chiyo. Her contradiction was that she burdened the next generation with her generation's problems, yet had no faith in them, and took no actions to help them bear that burden. In other words, she wouldn't take responsibility for them, but expected them to take responsibility for her. This dichotomy was strengthened by her reluctance to accept help from other villages, and she even went so far as to say that friendly alliances are fundamentally impossible. This was why Naruto impacted her so greatly. Despite belonging to a different village, he was able to connect to Gaara in a way that no other sand ninja could. At the same time, he denounced
and he completely shattered her worldview that, you know, the world, or not the world, but, you know, shinobi are separated off into their own villages or whatever, and because of that, they don't really care about shinobi from other villages. They only care about shinobis from their village and all of that. And what Naruto did here completely shattered that. It showed that she was absolutely wrong, and that it is possible for shinobi from different villages to care about others, especially if they're not from their own village.
The flawed practices that had led Gaara to this tragic situation. The flawed practices that Lady Chiyo had taken responsibility for. Since Naruto hadn't actually backed his words with meaningful action like in the past, however, Chiyo needed to face her contradiction through an outside party. She needed a battle of her own to strengthen her doubts, and that's exactly why she fought Sasori. Her grandson was a prime example of what Chiyo's toxic ideals had created. An emotionless puppet who felt nothing, even at the prospect of a close family member dying. To put it another way, you could say that Sasori viewed family as mere hulls of flesh connected by hatred and murderous intent. Not only had Chiyo's generation led Gaara to be tormented by Shukaku and alienated from the entire village, but they had also birthed a member of the Akatsuki, the very same organization that had already killed one Kazekage and had now taken another in Gaara. She had made two huge mistakes, but who was it that arrived to clean up her mess? Why, none other than Konoha, the same village she had avoided in the past. She had been proven definitively wrong, and that's why the lady who had previously displayed no hope for the future of the village sacrificed her life to save the one who would lead that village to a brighter future.
Okay, good. Ah, Kakuzu, the one who could defeat pain. How could I forget him? Also, speaking of Kakuzu, I think I remember someone asking me to react to the whole debate where someone apparently tries to convince someone that, I can't remember if it was Swag or whoever, someone else, that apparently Kakuzu can defeat pain or whatever, and that's how the whole joke of Kakuzu being FTL or whatever started to be shown around. And it's, oh man.
Akatsuki suppression was the only Naruto-focused arc that didn't include an instance of Talk no Jutsu, and as such, it's a good example of what the series could have been without this thematic through line. Unlike the other antagonists I've covered, Kakuzu didn't possess an ideological contradiction that Naruto was meant to challenge. Instead,
well, I will say the one thing about the Akatsuki suppression arc is that, yeah, Kakuzu was not necessarily the most compelling antagonist. It did feel like he was just there to provide an obstacle for Naruto and completing his Rasen Shuriken, and Naruto's whole journey of, you know, growing up, developing his own techniques, trying to get closer to Sasuke. And I feel like the one thing that people were interested in when it comes to the Akatsuki suppression was Shikamaru's story and his character progression against Hidan. and when he killed Asuma, and Shikamaru realizing that, okay, yeah, I need to step up, I need to take charge, because I can't stay a kid anymore. Which is interesting because he was technically still a kid. Remember, he was still only like 16 when that happened, and he realized that, yeah, I need to step up, I need to take charge. I can't just say, oh, this is a drag or whatever. I need to be serious. And we saw that in his fight against Hidan.
Served to advance Naruto's relationship with Sasuke. After failing to retrieve Sasuke during the aptly named mission, Naruto entered a downward spiral. His only real achievement during the Kazekage rescue arc was his influence on Lady Chiyo. Otherwise, he wasn't there to protect Gaara. He fell under
dead.
Itachi's Genjutsu, which only strengthened the sting of his failures. He did basically...
And the only reason why he got out was because, you know, Sakura and Chiyo were there, and then the only reason why he was able to land a hit on Itachi is because of Kakashi's plan. And yeah, technically Naruto didn't really accomplish anything on his own there.
Basically nothing to take down Deidara or Sasori. He threw a tantrum that nearly initiated a partial Nine-Tails transformation. Sure, if he hadn't confronted Chiyo like he did, Gaara might not have been revived, but as Naruto's last encounter with Sasuke showed, words alone weren't enough to bring Sasuke back. Naruto needed power if he was going to change Sasuke's mind, and he displayed none of that here. So, when the Tenchi Bridge mission took place, Naruto failed utterly. He wasn't just unsuccessful in persuading Sasuke, he barely registered on the dude's radar. After his face had been hidden for the entire arc, the first time we got to see Sasuke post-time skip was when he was looking down on Team 7 as if they were ants. This wasn't the same Naruto whom Sasuke had acknowledged just before the time skip. This wasn't the same Naruto that had stood across from him in the Valley of the End. This was a weak, pathetic Naruto who begged and cried and bowed his head. He didn't confront Sasuke like before, and instead said dejected things like, "Why didn't you kill me?" And, "If someone can't even save a friend, I don't think they deserve to be Hokage." He'd lost confidence in himself, in his ideals, and if Naruto didn't believe in what he was saying, why should Sasuke? Yeah. By the time Akatsuki suppression rolled around, Naruto was desperate for a win. He didn't care about inspiring anyone, he just wanted to prove to himself that his hopes and ideals were worth defending. Kakuzu served as Naruto's fodder, but that's the primary issue with his character. Kakuzu was largely disconnected from the two emotional payoffs in this arc, and that made him an underwhelming antagonist. He mostly stood on the sidelines when Hidan fought Asuma.
Which is why people who complain that Asuma's squad needed to also get revenge on Kakuzu or Su. Yeah, no, like, Kakuzu had nothing to do with it. I mean, yeah, he was there, but it was mostly Hidan. It's like, yeah, no, that's a stupid argument.
And he offered no ideological conflict to Naruto. He was just there to take the L, and that's a real shame. One of the most interesting aspects of Naruto is watching the titular knucklehead interact with these twisted parallels of himself and battle them on an ideological level as well as a physical one. But while I do ultimately defend this Talk No Jutsu motif, this was one example where the subject could have been given a little more nuance. If Kakuzu had possessed some sort of ideology that Naruto could have challenged, the battle between them could have been far more memorable. Since Naruto didn't need the ideological victory here, though, he could have still defeated Kakuzu without Talk No Jutsu. You can write a character with conviction and problematic ideals who still loses in the end. Just look at Stain from My Hero Academia. This failure to change Kakuzu would have played into the mixed feelings Naruto had after their fight. The after effects of the Rasen Shuriken were already meant to undercut his victory and prevent him from fully escaping his downward spiral before Jiraiya's death, and this added weight would have accentuated his desire to connect with pain even more. As things turned out, this arc which lacked Talk No Jutsu definitely didn't measure up to the ones that had it. What it did do, however, was give Naruto the confidence he needed to confront his toughest obstacle yet.
Oof.
互いの正義のために動く。俺がこの葉に対してやった正義が、お前が俺にやろうとしていることと同じだ。大切なものを失う痛みは誰も同じ。お前も俺もその痛みを知る者同士だ。お前はお前の正義のために。俺は俺の正義のために。俺たちは正義という名の復讐へと 駆り立てられた普通の人間だ。だが復讐を正義というならば、その正義はさらなる復讐を生み、憎しみの連鎖が始まる。
Pain sought.
So I just wanted to, first of all, Pain, oof. Fantastic villain. Absolutely fantastic. I just want to talk about something real quick. So it's this line right here that Pain says, you know, we're both ordinary men driven to vengeance under the banner of justice. I really like this line right here because it shows you, and this is especially interesting because after his fight with Jiraiya, where he like starts talking about himself like I'm a god or whatever, and then you had Conan, of course, saying that I'm an angel of God or whatever, and all that stuff. You got the feeling that, oh, okay, so this is just like a villain who bought into his own hype and believes that because he has all this power, he must be like an actual deity or whatever. And it's like, no, like he knows he's just a regular human being. He's just someone who has all this power. And him and Naruto technically are not different. At the end of the day, they're both regular human beings who were just gifted these incredible abilities, and you know, they're just using it to try to accomplish each of their goals. And I love that. I love that Kishimoto included this line right here of where he has you know, obviously Nagato talking through Pain, or the Tendo Pain, talking to Naruto about you know, my experience and why he does, or why he sees things the way he does, is that, you know, we humans, you know, and I think I said this in a previous video, you know, we humans, we strive for peace, but at the same time, we can't help but get involved in conflict. And it's like, but conflict is the opposite of peace. So, and some people use conflict to achieve peace, but at the same, and he even says it's like justice through vengeance is just going to cause more vengeance. You know, like he knows, I think he's not stupid. He knows that what he did here is just going to cause people to go after him. Even if he succeeded in capturing Naruto and succeeded in sealing at least that half of the Nine Tails inside the Gero Mazo, he knew that what he did here was going to cause someone down the line to eventually try to seek out justice against him. And then even if by some miracle he manages to succeed, then someone that cares about Nagato, i.e. I think the only one left is Conan, is going to try to get vengeance against them, whoever managed to get to Nagato. And then it's just going to continue. And these people who preach about peace, like you're saying you want peace, but you're doing things like this that you know is just going to cause the conflict to continue. So the only real way for there to be real peace is for someone, one side, to say, all right, enough is enough. No more vengeance. This has to stop. But unfortunately, it's a little difficult because, you know, when you are responsible for taking the life of someone that I care about, it's not easy to just let go of that hate. It's not easy. And I love this character, and again, this is another moment that people keep going back to because of just how well written it was.
Pain sought peace through oppression. He wanted to focus all hatred on himself and rule over the populace like a god.
Again, no. I think I said it in a previous video. Yeah, no, this is not Pain's goal.
But before he challenged the world as a whole, he first decided to test his ideology on a smaller scale. Enter the Hidden Rain Village. This was Pain's test subject, a land in which everyone feared the same entity, the same pain. The flow of information was limited by the constant rain, which served as both a censor to keep locals in and a barrier to keep foreigners out. It was nothing short of a dictatorship, but it worked. When Jiraiya infiltrated the village and interrogated 2 of its civilians, they resisted him not just for their own sake, but for Pain's as well. These guys didn't just fear Pain, they supported him, worshipped him even, at one point referring to Lord Pain as a god and Conan as an angel. Pain's vision had proven itself to be an effective one in both theory and practice. So with the Akatsuki backing him, he attempted to expand the scope of his influence. His new plan involved capturing all the tailed beasts and using their power to create Jutsu of mass destruction. With such power at
he wanted to create WMDs.
The Akatsuki would control all wars, and by destroying millions of
people,
or
I guess technically JMDs in this,
to experience the same loss, the same pain. This, in Pain's mind, was the only way to end all conflicts. for those who did not know pain would never understand true peace. His ultimate goal was to unite the world through empathy. So although his methods were cruel and extreme,
that's it.
He believed that the end justified the means.
And it had nothing to do with uniting the world against him. I just that part in and of itself is just I think is just wrong. That's not correct.
ふざけんな。俺の師匠を、俺の先生を、俺の仲間を、俺の里を。こんなにしやがったお前なんかが偉そうにほざいてんじゃねえ。
ならお前の目的は何だ。
お前をぶっ倒して俺がこの忍びの世界を平和にしてやる。
そうか、それは立派なことだ。それこそ正義だな。だが俺の家族、
My family, my friends, my village, yeah.
この里と同じようにしたお前たち木の葉の忍
It is the village by you, Konoha
平和
Shinobi.
と正義を口にすることを許されるわけではないだろう。
There's a good reason why even part
See, again, this is interesting because it plays into something that I said, and I think the video you guys should have seen before this is available on the channel. Is that, you know, Sasuke, like people again, they say that Sasuke's goal of wiping out the village, even the people who weren't responsible for what happened to him, that it's a bit much. And while on a level I agree with that, it's just that, again, you got to understand that, like, these people are also like choosing to live in ignorance. Like they don't even bother to question whether or not there might be something else going on in their village. They never even thought about the possibility of, you know, this village that you call home. Like, you realize they did some pretty effed up shit in the past, and yet you're still choosing to basically turn a blind eye to it. No, not everyone, of course, but I'm willing to bet there's some. Like, they don't even bother. They just choose to go, oh, like, let me just go about my day, not doing anything or whatever. But it's like, again, it's like, I'm not saying I agree with their condition. I don't think you should punish someone for something that someone else did in the past. That's just wrong, you know, because they had nothing to do with it. But at the same time, I get where they're coming from, and I feel like people just like they just see that, you know, Pain's actions, Sasuke's actions as being completely unrealistic. And then when someone goes after them, you're wondering like, wait, what did I ever do to you? And it's like, no, I'm not going after you specifically. I'm going after your village. I'm going after this entire place that was responsible for like committing these horrible acts against, you know, me, my family, my friends, my home. Even though we never did anything to you, you're the ones who struck first. And it's like, yeah, again, it's not fair, but you can't say you don't get where they're coming from.
haters will point to the Pain assault and say, this was when Naruto got good again. Pain.
Well, I mean, I wouldn't say this is where it got good again. I mean, I've always thought that part 2 of Naruto was good up until the Pain arc. Up until the Pain arc ended, and even some people are not really, like, I think some people are kind of split on Nagato's decision at the end to use Rinne Rebirth to bring back all the people who died. And I get that because it does kind of invalidate everything that happened. And again, it plays into what happened at the end of part 1, which is that, like, Kishimoto just didn't go through with his actions. Instead of just going through with it, keeping them dead, having those deaths be the consequences of the villain's actions, instead he chooses to find some way to bring them back. Now Kakashi I can kind of understand because he still had a story he wanted to tell with him and Obito and all of that. But if that's the case, then don't kill him. If you still had a story you wanted to tell, then don't kill him and then just bring him back, because that just kind of invalidates his death. I mean, at least he didn't bring Jiraiya back. At least he was able to go through with that, although that even kind of got invalidated at the end of, or not Naruto, but in Boruto, when, you know, the whole Kashin Koji thing. Even though I know it's not technically Jiraiya, like the real Jiraiya we know is still dead, but it's like, I still think that never should have happened.
Pain is one of, if not the most imposing antagonist the series has to offer, as he needed to be. After Naruto had defeated Kakuzu and started to escape his downward spiral, Pain killed Jiraiya and undercut Naruto's progress almost immediately. Then he presented Naruto with an ideological conflict that, while disagreeable, couldn't definitively be countered. Pain's perspective was reasonable, and his arguments appeared to be sound. But most importantly, Pain had conviction. He wasn't like Neji, whose actions and ideals had so blatantly contradicted each other at every turn. He didn't struggle with an internal conflict like Gaara, who had been continuously haunted by a more loving past that he so desperately wanted back. If Pain had an underlying contradiction in his ideals, he kept it hidden, just as he did his true identity. Where Neji's hypocrisy had been obvious, and Gaara's actions had been weakened by his own inner turmoil, Naruto couldn't read Pain, and Pain hadn't weakened himself. As such, when he was faced with the question, how would you confront this hatred in order to create peace, all Naruto could say was, I don't know, but your peace is still wrong. Of course, this response, which lacked any supporting evidence or pathos, wasn't going to satisfy a man with such conviction. To properly understand Pain and refute his ideology, Naruto had to confront him face to face. He had to hear the tale of Nagato, the man behind the mask, and only then could Naruto discover his enemy's hidden hypocrisy. The brilliant thing about Pain Nagato's characterization is that his contradictions were hiding in plain sight, but Kishimoto still managed to hide them behind other layers of his character, like the multifaceted power of the Rinnegan, the mystery surrounding his true identity, the emotional appeal behind his frightening ideals. But while Nagato's hypocrisy had been present even early on, Naruto didn't receive all of the details until the very end of the arc. Jiraiya was able to recognize the contradictions, but he was too late. He had lived a life full of failures, and thus had nothing to say that would change Nagato's mind. He could say that Nagato was wrong, but he had no experiences to support that claim. All he could do was have faith in Naruto, but when he died, he took his knowledge and memories of Nagato with him. Nothing was passed along to Naruto save the Tales of a Gutsy Shinobi novel Jiraiya had written using Nagato as inspiration for the protagonist. These elements added weight to his presence in the story, but they were carefully integrated in a way that didn't detract from his equally intricate hypocrisy, something that had been hinted at from the very beginning. Nagato had convinced himself that he was still striving for the same goal as Jiraiya, but in reality, he had abandoned Jiraiya's teachings long ago. More specifically, by attempting to unite everyone through pain, Nagato had abandoned true empathy. He placed himself on a pedestal and called himself a god that would rule over the world and guide it.
This is now an iconic moment
in
in anime.
So, he stopped trying to understand and empathize with people. At one point, he even told Naruto flat out,
Yes.
And yet he still tried to connect them through a mutual understanding of pain. His ideology was fundamentally flawed, and as Naruto started learning more and more about him, the cracks in Nagato's argument began to intensify until it eventually shattered entirely. He wanted to guide the world toward peace, but he later said that true peace cannot exist, and so he would instead strive for periods of temporary peace. All of this he said without recognizing how twisted his original goal had become. As an outsider looking in, however, Naruto did recognize it, but he could only do so after he had defeated the 6 Paths of Pain, a literal manifestation of Naruto moving past his pain. By feeling a burning hatred and then deciding to compromise on his vengeance for the sake of peace, Naruto did what Nagato had failed to do. He never lost hope, and he didn't forsake himself or his sensei. Just like with Jiraiya, Nagato rejected this as a non-answer, so Naruto went right after Nagato's contradiction. When Naruto quoted Jiraiya's book, Nagato realized that he had become the very thing he had once been fighting against. The moment pain was created was the moment Nagato lost faith in himself. His alliance with the Akatsuki and his attack on Konoha had all been for nothing, so in his last act, he undid as much damage as he could with the Rinne Rebirth and put his faith in Naruto, hoping that the young ninja could carry his dream forward and succeed where he had failed. Nagato had changed over time, and in changing, he had contradicted himself. But though Naruto had stumbled as well, he ultimately stayed true to his word. At the end of their clash to move toward peace.
Also, I just wanted to talk about this for a second.
But though Naruto had stumbled as well, he ultimately stayed true.
I do love this because it was like Kishimoto kind of foreshadowing something that was going to happen in the future where, you know, like when Naruto is working together with Kurama and then he adds Sage Mode on top of it and you can see it right here. And then of course you have 6-Path Sage Mode where it's just this and without this, which I don't think he can use anymore.
True to his word. At the end of their clash to move toward peace, Naruto's pending answer was better than Nagato's wrong answer. And so Nagato decided to match Naruto's compromise with one of his own. This was hardly a definitive victory, though, as Naruto's exchange with Pain would weigh on his mind all throughout the chaotic 5 Kage summit. This arc served as a key turning point in the series where the pessimistic principles of the ninja world began to shift on a large scale. While Naruto had been protecting the village from Pain, Sasuke had joined the Akatsuki and become a wanted criminal. This once again undercut Naruto's momentum, as he was then bombarded by a bunch of new information and problems that were outside of his control. With the Pain compromise and his lack of an answer still stressing him out, Naruto could do nothing but beg and take a beating on Sasuke's behalf. Without supporting actions, his warnings about vengeance and the cycle of hatred accomplished nothing. Worse still, Sasuke had moved further into darkness, making it even more difficult for he and Naruto to understand each other. In the meantime, Gaara's path to redemption had finally placed him in a position where he could attempt his own talk no jutsu in Naruto's place. The first of these took place at the Gokage Council, where Gaara's Naruto-esque boldness resonated with the stubborn Tsuchikage and led him to work alongside the other villages. The second was with Sasuke, and since they had once shared a mutual understanding in the past, Sasuke gave Gaara a chance. Their roles had reversed after all. Gaara had gained a tremendous power on both the path of hatred and the path of love, something that Sasuke had been unable to do. So his perspective wasn't worthless. Because he didn't make a strong enough effort to connect to Sasuke now though, Gaara quickly failed. He saw the same look in Sasuke's eyes that he did before, but he made the mistake of attempting to reach the old Sasuke that had been torn in two. He
didn't understand who Sasuke is now. Instead he tried to talk to, you know, this version of Sasuke, which, yeah.
Sasuke may have shared the same look in his eyes, but those eyes had evolved. He no longer had any need for, nor interest in, personal ties. He had found power down the path of isolation, a power far greater than Gaara had achieved. So when Gaara continued to lecture him based on his own experiences, instead of attempt to understand the man before him, Sasuke lost interest. Like Naruto at Tenchi Bridge, Gaara had nothing new to offer, and when push came to shove, he tried to bring Sasuke down by force and failed. Something similar took place with Kakashi and Sakura, two people who had once been able to reach out to Sasuke, but now were unable to do so due to their lack of understanding. While everyone was telling Sasuke that what he was doing was wrong, they weren't making an effort to relate to him, and so he didn't care about their opinions. On the other hand, Naruto, who had wanted to understand Sasuke from the very beginning, had now experienced Sasuke's pain. But since the situation had changed, he still couldn't counter him. To connect to Sasuke and finally convince him to return home, Naruto first had to confront his hatred in the form of the nine-tailed fox. In the past, he feared the fox's power, ran away from his hatred. Only when he had given in to despair did Naruto let the fox's rage rampage. But when that happened, Naruto was never in control. To properly match Sasuke, who had achieved power by embracing his hatred, Naruto needed to control his own by taming the nine-tailed fox. Upon doing that, he had finally leveled the playing field for their clash at the end of the war. From there, Sasuke's defeat was inevitable. He had planned to cut all ties and bear all the world's hatred from the shadows, but in the end, he couldn't cut down Naruto. He never could. His desire to protect his comrades hadn't been erased entirely, as instinctual displays of selflessness like the one he displayed against Haku had continued to slip through on occasion, even during the war. As well as that, Sasuke knew the pain of loneliness. Unlike Pain, who in a similar position viewed—
And that's that's something that I think a lot of people also kind of forget, is that even though Sasuke went out there and he kept saying that he wanted to, you know, cut down Naruto, and I think I've already talked about this in like a previous video or maybe multiple videos, But deep down, Naruto, excuse me, deep down, Sasuke never actually wanted to cut down Naruto. He never wanted to genuinely do that. He just believed that that's what was necessary in order for him to accomplish his goal. But he never actually wanted to do that. That's why I still believe that in their final fight, like, Sasuke wasn't actually operating at 100%, because if you remember, like, fights in Naruto, in order to properly utilize your ability, you have to be mentally and physically at 100%. Your mental energy and physical energy have to be perfectly in sync in order for you to draw your full capabilities. But Sasuke, at least in my opinion, this is just how I've always seen it, other people may disagree, but because he never actually wanted to do that, but he kept trying to convince himself, that sort of mentally, I guess you could say, nerfed him to the point where he can't fully draw out his, like, full abilities. Because, for example, like, you could say, like, right at the end, if he genuinely, truly, in his heart of hearts wanted Naruto dead, when he was absorbing chakra from Naruto, he didn't need to stop. He could have just kept absorbing it until Naruto had nothing left. He could have done that, but he didn't. Or if he wanted, he could have just grabbed Naruto's head and just shoved it into the water and just kept it there until he drowned, but he didn't. Instead, he got up, he tried to do the Chidori, and instead he, ironically enough, gave Naruto a chance to counter. So yeah, I think that does play a part in it.
As well as that, Sasuke knew the pain of loneliness. Unlike Pain, who in a similar position viewed himself as a righteous god, Sasuke knew that his notion of a Hokage would lead to his own suffering. Even as he was giving his response to Naruto, he hesitated. Deep down, Sasuke couldn't abandon his connections. He couldn't go back to being alone, and that's why he had lost before the battle even began. With that being said, Naruto's previous ideological opponent didn't go down so easily, and much like Sasuke, he served as a culmination of everything Naruto had faced beforehand. Obito was a culmination of the enemies Naruto had defeated beforehand, which made him the perfect precursor to the final boss. Or at least he would have if Madara had been the final antagonist, but that's a subject for another time. He tapped into Naruto's greatest fears and challenged him on the things he had previously overcome, his isolation and his pain. One of his conversations with Naruto even acted as a direct extension of the pain compromise. But because Obito had abandoned hope entirely, he continued to push Naruto further than Nagato had. Unlike Nagato, Obito didn't care about what Naruto had been entrusted with. He knew from the beginning that Naruto shared an ideal that he too once held in the past, and that's why he wanted to test him. He wanted to see how Naruto would react to failure firsthand. He wanted to break him down and watch a new version of his younger self abandon the world all over again. He wanted Naruto to validate his own choices and prove that his life wasn't a complete failure. Naruto found strength in connections. Obito suffered because of his connections. Naruto confronted his pain. Obito tried to escape his own. At first, not unlike Sasuke, he appeared to be Naruto's polar opposite. Both he and Sasuke had found suffering in their connections and decided to cut themselves off from the world. But while Naruto had a deep understanding of Sasuke through their long history with each other, which then made the result of their battle a foregone conclusion, Naruto didn't know Obito's tale at all, and thus couldn't recognize his contradictions right off the bat. As more details of his past began to surface, however, it became obvious that he was just another twisted reflection of Naruto. What set him apart from Naruto's previous opponents, however, was the dynamic of their fight. While Naruto was searching for Obito's hypocrisy, Obito was looking for Naruto's. He wanted to see if an unbreakable will could truly exist, or if such a thing was mere fantasy. So on that note, Were Naruto's actions consistent with his ideals? It's one thing to say, "I'll never go back on my word," but this theme would ultimately fall flat if Naruto was a hypocrite all along whose behavior was never questioned. So let's examine his core principles and see if they hold up. After his team was attacked during the escort mission, he vowed that he would never run away again. He contradicted this during the Chunin exams when he wanted to run from Gaara, but Gaara called him out on it. He threw Naruto's boasting back in his face, and when push came to shove, Naruto overcame his fear to protect his comrades. He acknowledged his hypocrisy and truly corrected it, for that was the last opponent he ever tried to run from. Another component of his ninja code also defined in the Land of Waves arc was his belief that shinobi were human beings, not tools. Thus, when facing his enemies, he treated them not as objects to use or break, but as people to reform. His battles weren't just battles, they served as a dialogue between two characters. This was also contradicted in a meaningful way. During the first Sasuke fight, Naruto demanded that Sasuke acknowledge him as an equal right after he said that he would drag Sasuke back to Konoha by force. Sasuke initially refused, of course, because Naruto wasn't displaying equality in his actions, he was attempting to display dominance. Sasuke's eventual compromise came only after Naruto stated that he saw Sasuke as a brother. But while he was willing to compromise, Naruto was not.
No.
Even after he had been acknowledged, Naruto still refused to acknowledge Sasuke's desires. And so he had already lost the ideological battle.
Yeah, again, it goes back to the fact that like characters like Naruto, Sakura, Kakashi at some point, like they, well, maybe not Kakashi, like at some point they always like try to basically ignore what Sasuke wanted. They kept telling him like, no, what you want is wrong and all that stuff. And it's like, that in my opinion was not the right move. Like they, and I'm not saying that they shouldn't like disagree with what Sasuke wanted to do. I just think that maybe a better method would have been for Kakashi, especially. I think that Kakashi is the right person to do this, because at that moment in part one, I think he's the only one who actually understands what Sasuke is going through, because he knows what it feels like to have people that you care about taken away from you. I feel like if he had basically just told them, it's like, look, I know you're obsessed with revenge and all that, but let me just tell you, like, as someone who doesn't know what you're going through, this is what's going to happen to you. Okay, I'm not going to tell you what to do, but just let me tell you as a warning, as your teacher, as your sensei, let me tell you, this is what you're probably going to go through. As someone who with experience, this is what's going to happen to you. If you still want to continue down this path of revenge, if you still want to let like revenge take over your life, if you still want to be obsessed with it, then there's nothing I can really do about it. But just let me tell you, this is what's going to happen to you. Just talk to him like that. And I feel Naruto and Sakura, I can understand because they're kids. They don't really they don't really know any better. I can understand them. But I feel like Kakashi, if he had just told him that, if he had just talked to him like that, I feel like it probably would have worked a lot more than just consistently telling him, you need to let it go, you need to let it go. Just consistently telling him what to do, basically sort of putting down what he wants to do. I just think it's a bad idea. And Naruto even tries to do that here in the fight at the Valley of the End, at the end of part one. And I think that was the wrong move. And I don't know if that's what Kishimoto was going for, but again, it does make sense. And yeah, I just, that's something that you just noticed. And even all the way into the 5 Kage Summon arc, it just felt like people again consistently just trying to force their ideals onto him and just completely ignoring what he wants to do, not even trying to understand it, at least not in the way that I feel like it probably would have actually helped.
This hypocrisy led to Naruto's downward spiral, something he only recovered from after addressing his hypocrisy. To move forward, he had to correct his contradiction and compromise. His hypocrisy was a critical part of his character arc, and for the most part, it was handled well. I can't say it was perfect, however, because Kakuzu's fight with Naruto wasn't a meaningful contradiction that Naruto could grow from. He needed a win to get closer to Sasuke. Kakuzu gave him that win. In other words, Kakuzu was a tool Naruto used to reach Sasuke. Had he been fighting Kakuzu to protect his comrades, this might not have mattered. After all, keeping his allies alive had always been his top priority. See Gaara and Kaguya. But that wasn't why he wanted to beat Kakuzu. He vehemently rejected help and fought alone for the sole purpose of matching Sasuke's strength. It's an unaddressed contradiction, plain and simple. Kakuzu aside, the prior contradictions in Naruto's character gave Obito something to exploit. He continuously pressured Naruto to see if he would give up, but each time he wavered, one of his comrades stepped in to remind him of everything they had accomplished before and of what they were fighting for now. Just as Naruto wanted to help others, he could be helped by them. Obito, on the other hand, was alone. He lacked the same support network that Naruto had built, so instead of testing Naruto, he wound up testing himself. As Naruto was continually validated, Obito's will started to weaken. He began to see images of an alternate reality where he hadn't abandoned his comrades, where he hadn't abandoned hope. The dream that he had wanted to fulfill in the infinite Tsukuyomi became real. His ideal world, his ideal self, was standing right in front of him. Obito lost hope in reality and pursued a dream, and because of that, any happiness he could obtain on that path would only be an illusion. Plus, he had claimed that the name Obito Uchiha was meaningless to him, but it was his past experiences that continued to motivate his actions. His contradictions were obvious, but he had repressed the past for so long that his denial was nearly impossible to break through. Even after Naruto had looked into his heart and spelled it out to him point blank, Obito still rejected the truth. He stubbornly defended his choices because to do otherwise would undo everything he had spent a majority of his life working towards. He would be forced to accept that he had sacrificed everything for nothing. As he began to acknowledge Naruto's words, as well as his own mistakes, he tried to rationalize his position. There's no need to walk a rugged path with an unclear endpoint. Anyone would take the easy path to peace, and that's just what I'm doing. Naruto refuted that there were no shortcuts or easy ways to escape hardship. Obito was just running away from his problems and projecting righteousness onto himself. But even then, he hadn't truly given up.
Hold on. You gotta, yeah.
だったら今さら木陰の自分なんか想像すんな。ディンが見守りたかったのは今のお前じゃねえよ。内葉オビトだ。
Naruto was able to defeat Gaara by himself for the sake of his comrades, so when Obito was too much for him to handle alone, his comrades returned the favor. His journey had come full circle. Hope had taken a physical form in the bonds he had forged, and as Obito lay defeated on the battlefield, he finally confronted his hypocrisy and acknowledged this hope once again.
Again, this is just like, for me personally, again, I don't know if other people may see this the way I do, but for me personally, this is one thing that I really like about the Naruto series, is that, you know, every villain that Naruto faces off against, and it's not just Naruto, other series also do this too, but when he faces off against the villain, like, he always walks away learning something from them. Like, he grows from his interactions with them. Excuse me, I got something stuck in my throat. But yeah, okay, yeah. Oh, by the way, don't worry, we're going to be ending this video soon because we're way over the 1 hour mark. Well, not way over, but we are over the 1 hour mark. And that's just something that, again, I feel like is kind of is kind of missing right now. Like, if you look at a lot of the villains in Boruto, like, what other than, okay, Momoshiki, okay, yes, that's, I'll give you that. But other than that, like, what does Boruto really learn from the antagonists that he faces off against? It just feels like they're there. It just feels like, oh, I guess, sorry, excuse me. It just feels like, okay, like, this is just another villain. We need a villain for them to face off against, and it's just that, like, there's no growth from it. There's no learning other than power, other than growing in power, especially in the most recent fight. Like, what does Boruto learn from it? Like, really, like, what does he learn about himself? What does he learn about his villain? What does he learn? How does he grow as a person? Again, power doesn't count, but how does he grow as a person? It's like, it feels like it's not there. Like, Boruto, to me, ever since the Momoshiki arc, or the versus Momoshiki arc, ever since that ended, Boruto has basically been the same person. Like, there's no growth. He doesn't grow. He doesn't change as a person. He's the same. Like, he hasn't changed at all. Excuse me. I feel like that's something that the series right now desperately needs. I mean, I'm talking about the Boruto series, both the manga and the anime. I feel like that's needed, because other than that, it's just, it feels like just a generic series where generic action series where like throw in a villain every arc and just have the hero win at the end, and that's it. Okay, yeah, I don't like this line. Excuse me, I hated this line. I still do, actually, because it's like, dude, you know, you're still talking about the person who is basically responsible for your parents' death. It's like, no, to me, I always found this a little hard to believe. I never believed that Naruto would actually say, oh, you're awesome because you tried to be Hokage. It's like, that doesn't change the fact that this dude sent the Nine Tails to destroy your village and is responsible for your parents' death. It's like, man, I hate this line. All right, so okay, we're just gonna play through it because I don't want this video to go any longer than it needs to be.
This quote has garnered criticism for being too sympathetic towards Obito. Some people even believe that this acceptance undoes the tragic elements of his character, and this potential frustration is understandable. Here's Naruto, the protagonist and moral center of the story, praising the man responsible for Neji's death. I can see why that would raise a few eyebrows, so let's unpack what Naruto actually said here. At the end of the day, Naruto saw Obito not as a murderer or traitor, but as an ally. And if you've been keeping up with Naruto's characterization up to this point, you'd understand why this makes perfect sense. He chose to value the good in Obito over the bad, just as he had done with Sasuke, Pain, Gaara, Neji, and many others before him. Obito may have made countless mistakes in the past, but he tried to atone for what little he could in his final act. And there's something worth noting in that, especially for Obito. He didn't just abandon his sensei's teachings or his comrades, he abandoned the entire world. He forsook everything and dedicated years of his life to a worthless illusion. In those final moments, he had to admit that his entire life up to that point was a waste. But even then, deep down, he never lost hope. After dragging the shinobi world into war to benefit himself, he died to protect the future of shinobi. Of course that would resonate with Naruto. Of course he would get defensive over Obito. Does that mean Obito's actions were completely forgiven? No. Naruto didn't forgive Nagato for killing Jiraiya, but when Obito criticized his final act, Naruto was still willing to defend him. You can certainly disagree with the optimism Kishimoto presents, but at no point is it ever inconsistent or problematic. The same goes with Talk no Jutsu. Perhaps it doesn't align to your particular tastes, but Naruto isn't worse off for having its antagonists change their ideals in the end. If anything, the series is all the more interesting for having crafted this narrative through line. Anybody can write a fight scene where two people punch each other until one guy falls down, but it takes at least a bit of creativity to craft complex, compelling characters that consistently conform to contradictory conduct. I wouldn't call Naruto a masterpiece because of this, but I'd definitely call Kishimoto a genius. Or maybe I've just been Talk no Jutsu'd.
This
video took an eternity to make, but in the process of doing so, I came up with like 5 or 6 other script ideas, so I hope you're ready for the summer of Naruto, because I've got a bunch of Naruto videos that I want to make now. The obvious one being a video about Madara, because he still conforms to this idea of hypocrisy, but with the structure I had devised for this script, Madara just couldn't fit. And there's also some other stuff I'd like to touch on with Kaguya there. So that's going to be its own separate video, kind of an addendum to this script. And beyond that, there's plenty of other ideas I want to get to eventually, because Naruto's actually a good series, guys. I guess this is what happens when you talk about a long-running shonen manga for like 40 hours on a podcast. Is you're gonna have a lot to say about it when you revisit it. If you like listening to critical analysis of Naruto or just long-running shonen manga / anime in general, or if you just want to support more long-form projects like this, then be sure to head on over to patreon.com and join the likes of King Kevin 30, Stone Cold Trip.
Okay, so that's just okay, so excuse me. Yeah, okay, guys, I need to wrap this up quick because we're over an hour, and usually I don't like videos that go over an hour because it's just it's not only because I think it's most people don't really like watching over an hour long video or any video over an hour, excuse me. But also these videos are not easy to upload. Anything over an hour is insanely difficult to upload. Like, it takes way too goddamn long. Anyway, I really hope you enjoyed the video, guys. Make sure to like, share, subscribe, and also check out the links in the description to MathWiz's channel as well as this video. Make sure you head on over there, subscribe, go show them some support, and do the same thing with other creators we watch here. So again, I hope you enjoyed the video, and I hope to see you for the next reaction. Bye for now.